The university president was about to unveil the plaque with my name on it. My parents stood frozen in the crowd, their faces drained of color. My sister Cassandra clutched her diploma like a lifeline, her mouth hanging open in shock. And me? I stood on that stage in front of hundreds of people, wearing the success they said I'd never achieve like armor. But let me take you back to where this story really began, because what happened that day wasn't luck. It was revenge served with a PhD. My name is Selene, and I'm 28 years old now. But when I was 22, I was nothing but a disappointment wrapped in shame. At least, that's what my family made me believe. The memory is still crystal clear, even though it happened 6 years ago. I can still feel the humid Tennessee air on my skin, still hear the cicadas singing their evening song, still see the way my mother's lip curled when she looked at me standing in our driveway with my single suitcase and a garbage bag of clothes. "You're nothing but an ugly failure," she said, her voice cold enough to freeze the summer heat. "Don't you dare show your face at this family again." My father stood behind her, arms crossed, nodding in agreement. And Cassandra, my younger sister by 3 years, watched from her bedroom window upstairs, her face illuminated by her desk lamp. She was studying for her pre-med finals. She was always studying, always achieving, always everything I wasn't. I was the daughter who had just dropped out of college. The one who couldn't handle the pressure. The one who had thrown away a full scholarship because of mental health issues, which my parents interpreted as weakness and attention-seeking behavior. "Please," I had begged that night, tears streaming down my face. "I just need some time to figure things out. I'm not giving up, I just need help." My mother's laugh was sharp as broken glass. "Help? We've given you everything. The best schools, the best opportunities, and this is how you repay us? By quitting? By embarrassing us in front of everyone we know?" "Your mother is right," my father added, his voice flat and emotionless. "We raised you to be strong, to be successful. If you can't handle college, if you're going to throw away your education over some imaginary problems, then you're not the daughter we thought you were." I tried to explain. I tried to tell them about the panic attacks that made my chest feel like it was caving in. About the depression that made getting out of bed feel like climbing a mountain. About the voice in my head that told me I was worthless, stupid, that I'd never be good enough no matter how hard I tried. But they didn't want to hear it. To them, mental illness was a character flaw, not a medical condition. To them, I was just making excuses for being lazy and weak. "Cassandra manages just fine," my mother said, gesturing up toward my sister's window. "She has a 4.0 GPA. She's going to be a doctor. She doesn't fall apart and quit when things get hard." The comparison stung, but it wasn't new. I'd been compared to Cassandra my entire life. She was the golden child, the perfect daughter, the one who made our parents proud. I was the disappointment, the plain one, the failure who couldn't quite measure up. "I'm not Cassandra," I whispered, but the words came out broken. "No, you're not," my father agreed. "Cassandra has ambition. She has drive. She has discipline. You have excuses." That was the moment something inside me shattered completely. Not my spirit, though they tried their best to break that too, but my illusion that they loved me unconditionally. That they saw me as anything more than a reflection of their own image, a trophy to display at dinner parties and country club gatherings. "Leave," my mother said finally, turning her back on me. "We won't support someone who gives up. When you're ready to grow up and finish your degree, maybe we'll reconsider. Until then, you're on your own." I stood there for another moment, hoping one of them would turn around. Hoping my father would tell my mother she was being too harsh. Hoping Cassandra would come running down the stairs to defend me, to tell our parents they were wrong. But none of that happened. The front door closed. The porch light went out. And I was left standing there in the dark with everything I owned in a suitcase and a garbage bag. That was 6 years ago. And what happened next changed everything. The first few months after they kicked me out were the darkest of my life. I couch surfed at friends' apartments, staying a week here, a few days there, never wanting to overstay my welcome but having nowhere else to go. I worked 3 jobs just to afford food and keep my phone active. I waitressed at a diner from 6 a.m. to 2 p.m., cleaned offices from 3 p.m. to 7 p.m., and stocked shelves at a 24-hour grocery store from 11 p.m. to 4 a.m. I slept in my car some nights, parked behind the grocery store, too exhausted to drive to wherever I was staying that week. I ate ramen noodles and whatever expired food the diner let me take home. I wore the same 3 outfits over and over, washing them in gas station bathrooms. I was 22 years old, and I felt like my life was over before it had really begun. The depression that had made me leave school got worse. Much worse. There were days when I sat in my car and thought about just driving until I ran out of gas, then walking into the woods and never coming back. There were nights when I'd stand on bridges and wonder what it would feel like to jump, to just make all the pain stop. But something kept me here. Maybe it was stubbornness. Maybe it was anger. Maybe it was the small, quiet voice inside me that whispered, "They don't get to be right about you." I started seeing a therapist at a free community health clinic. Dr. Sarah Chen was her name, and she saved my life. She helped me understand that my mental health struggles weren't weakness, they were a response to years of emotional abuse and unrealistic expectations. She taught me coping mechanisms. She helped me see that I had value beyond my parents' approval. "What do you want, Selene?" she asked me during one session, about 4 months after I'd been kicked out. "Not what your parents want. Not what you think you should want. What do you actually want for your life?" I sat there in that small office with its second-hand furniture and motivational posters, and I realized I didn't know. I'd spent so long trying to please my parents, trying to be what they wanted me to be, that I'd never asked myself what I wanted. "I want to prove them wrong," I said finally, and it felt like the most honest thing I'd said in years. Dr. Chen smiled. "Okay. That's a start. But revenge isn't a sustainable life goal." "What else?" I thought harder. "I want to finish my degree. Not for them, but for me. I want to show myself that I can do it." "What were you studying before you left school?" "Biochemistry," I said. I was actually really good at it. I loved the research, the experiments, the way everything fit together like a puzzle. But my parents thought I should go to medical school like Cassandra, and when I said I wanted to do research instead of patient care, they were disappointed. "So you were succeeding at something you loved, but they made you feel like it wasn't enough?" I nodded, and suddenly tears were streaming down my face. I had a 3.8 GPA. I was working in a lab. I had a professor who wanted me to help with her research study. But my parents kept pushing me to switch to pre-med, to be more like Cassandra, and I just couldn't do it anymore. The pressure broke me. Dr. Chen handed me a tissue. "You didn't break, Selene. You bent. And now we're going to help you straighten back up, stronger than before." That session was my turning point. I decided right then that I was going back to school. Not to make my parents proud. Not to prove anything to them. But to prove something to myself, that I was capable, that I was strong, that I could build a life worth living. But what happened next, no one could have predicted. Getting back into university wasn't easy. I'd withdrawn mid-semester, which meant I had incomplete grades on my transcript. I'd burned through my scholarship by leaving. And I had exactly $347 in my bank account. I went to the financial aid office at my old university and met with a counselor named Mrs. Rodriguez. I told her everything. The whole ugly truth about my mental health crisis, my family kicking me out, my determination to return and finish my degree. She listened without judgment, taking notes occasionally. When I finished, she looked at me with kind eyes and said, "Let me see what I can do." It turned out that students who withdrew for medical reasons, including mental health crises, could petition to return and have their incomplete grades changed to withdrawals, which wouldn't affect their GPA. There were also emergency grants and loans available for students in financial hardship. Mrs. Rodriguez became my advocate. She helped me navigate the bureaucracy, fill out the forms, and write the appeals. She connected me with professors who remembered me from my biochemistry classes and were willing to write letters of recommendation supporting my return. 3 months later, I received a letter in the mail. I'd been readmitted to the university for the spring semester. I'd received an emergency grant that would cover most of my tuition and a small living stipend. I was going back. I sat in my car, which had become more of a home than anywhere else, and cried with relief. This was my chance. My one shot to change my life. I moved into the cheapest student housing I could find, a tiny room in a shared house with 5 other students, all of us broke and desperate. My room was barely big enough for a twin bed and a desk, but it was mine. I decorated it with pictures I printed at the library and motivational quotes I wrote on index cards and taped to the wall. You are enough. Your past doesn't define your future. Keep going. I read those words every morning when I woke up and every night before I went to sleep. Returning to classes was harder than I expected. I'd been gone for almost a year, and I felt like everyone was staring at me, judging me, knowing I was the girl who couldn't handle it and had to drop out. But I pushed through the anxiety. I sat in the front row. I asked questions. I went to every office hour. And I discovered something amazing. I was actually brilliant at biochemistry. Without the constant pressure from my parents, without the comparisons to Cassandra, without the weight of their expectations crushing me, I could finally focus on learning. And I loved it. I loved understanding how proteins folded, how enzymes catalyzed reactions, how tiny molecular machines kept our cells alive. My professors noticed. Dr. Patricia Okafor, who taught advanced biochemistry, pulled me aside after class one day. Your work is exceptional, Selene. Have you thought about graduate school? I'd been back for only 1 semester, barely keeping my head above water financially and emotionally, and she was asking about graduate school? I don't know if I can afford it, I admitted. If you're good enough, the program pays you, she said with a smile. PhD students get tuition waivers and a stipend for living expenses. You teach or do research in exchange. And you, Selene, are definitely good enough. The seed was planted. Maybe I could do more than just finish my bachelor's degree. Maybe I could go further than anyone expected. Maybe I could become Dr. Selene. But first, I had to survive the next 3 years of undergrad. I worked throughout college, still juggling part-time jobs with my classes. I tutored other students in chemistry and biology. I worked as a research assistant in Dr. Okafor's lab. I cleaned houses on weekends. Every dollar went toward rent, food, and textbooks. I didn't go home for holidays. I didn't call my parents or my sister. They'd made it clear I wasn't welcome, and I'd accepted that. Sometimes I'd see photos on social media before I blocked them all: Cassandra at family dinners, Cassandra at medical school graduation ceremonies, Cassandra smiling with our parents who looked so proud. It hurt, but it also fueled me. Every time I felt tired or wanted to give up, I thought about their faces when they kicked me out. I thought about my mother calling me an ugly failure. I thought about my father saying I had no discipline. And I worked harder. I graduated with my bachelor's degree 3 years after returning to school. I finished with a 3.95 GPA. I was accepted into the biochemistry PhD program at the same university with full funding. And Dr. Okafor agreed to be my advisor. I was 25 years old, and I was just getting started. But what no one knew yet was that my research would change everything. PhD programs are brutal. Everyone told me that, but I didn't truly understand until I was in the thick of it. The first year was coursework and exams, studying until 2 a.m., surviving on coffee and determination. The second year was starting my actual research project, which meant long hours in the lab, experiments that failed over and over, and moments of crushing self-doubt. My research focused on protein misfolding in neurodegenerative diseases. Basically, I was trying to understand why certain proteins in the brain folded incorrectly and clumped together, causing diseases like Alzheimer's and Parkinson's. If we could figure out how to prevent that misfolding, we might be able to prevent or treat these diseases. It was important work. It was fascinating work. It was also incredibly difficult work. I spent months developing a new technique for visualizing protein structures using advanced microscopy. I failed hundreds of times. I troubleshot equipment. I optimized protocols. I read research papers until my eyes burned. I presented my preliminary findings at lab meetings where other graduate students and professors questioned every aspect of my methods. Dr. Okafor was a demanding advisor, but she believed in me. "You're doing something no one has done before, Selene," she told me during one particularly discouraging week when nothing was working. "That's what makes it worth doing. If it were easy, someone else would have already done it." Slowly, painstakingly, I made progress. My technique worked. The images I captured of misfolded proteins were clearer than anything previously published in the scientific literature. I started writing my first research paper. And then something extraordinary happened. I submitted my paper to one of the top journals in biochemistry. The peer review process took months, other scientists reviewing my work, critiquing my methods, asking for additional experiments. I addressed every concern, did every additional test they requested. And then, on a random Tuesday afternoon in November when I was 27 years old, I received an email. My paper had been accepted for publication. Not just accepted, the editors wanted to feature it as the cover article. They called my work groundbreaking and a significant advance in understanding protein misfolding. I sat in the lab staring at my computer screen, reading the email over and over, making sure it was real. Dr. Okafor came to check on me and found me crying at my desk. "What's wrong?" she asked, alarmed. I couldn't speak. I just turned my laptop toward her so she could read the email. Her face broke into the biggest smile I'd ever seen. "Selene, this is incredible. Do you know what this means?" I shook my head, still unable to find words. "This means you're going to be a star in this field. This means you're going to graduate and have your pick of postdoctoral positions. This means you've done something truly significant." The paper was published 3 months later. My name, Selene Morrison, was on the cover of one of the most prestigious journals in biochemistry. The article got attention. Other researchers started citing my work. I was invited to present at conferences. And that's when things got even more interesting. The university's development office reached out to Dr. Okafor. There was a major donor who wanted to fund biochemistry research, specifically work related to neurodegenerative diseases. They'd read my paper and were impressed. They wanted to meet me. The meeting was set up for early March. I wore my best professional outfit, a simple black dress and blazer that I'd bought at a thrift store and had tailored to fit properly. I walked into the university's administration building feeling nervous but also proud. This was me, Selene, the girl who'd been kicked out and called a failure, meeting with major donors who wanted to fund my research. The donor turned out to be a woman in her 60s named Margaret Chen, no relation to my therapist Dr. Chen. She'd watched her husband die from Alzheimer's disease and wanted to fund research that might help other families avoid that pain. We talked for 2 hours. I explained my research in terms she could understand, showed her the images I'd captured, described what I hoped to accomplish next. She asked thoughtful questions. She told me stories about her husband, about watching him slowly forget her, forget their children, forget his own name. By the end of the meeting, we were both crying. "I want to fund your research," Mrs. Chen said. "I want to establish a laboratory in my husband's name, and I want you to run it." I stared at her. "I'm not even finished with my PhD yet." "You will be soon. And when you are, I want you to have the resources you need to continue this work." "How much would you need?" I thought about all the equipment I'd dreamed of having, all the experiments I wanted to run but couldn't afford, all the students I could train. "Several $1,000,000, I admitted, expecting her to balk. She didn't. "I'll give you $5 million to start. We'll establish the Chen Laboratory for Protein Research, and you'll be the director as soon as you complete your degree. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. This wasn't just funding for my research. This was a laboratory with my name attached to it, a position that would make me a leader in my field at just 28 years old. But the best part? The part that would change everything with my family? Mrs. Chen wanted the laboratory to be housed in a new building. And she wanted to fund the entire building construction, $30 million. The university would name it after her husband, the David Chen Biochemistry Research Center. And I would be the inaugural director of research. The university president held a press conference to announce the donation. Local news covered it. The university sent out press releases. And my name was everywhere, Dr. Selene Morrison, ABD, all but dissertation at that point, pioneering researcher, inaugural director, rising star in biochemistry. My parents lived 2 hours away. They still had friends in this town. People they knew would see those articles. And I knew, with absolute certainty, that the news would reach them. But I wasn't done yet. Because my PhD defense was scheduled for late April. And Cassandra's medical school graduation was scheduled for early May at a university just across town. And I was about to make sure my parents couldn't ignore me anymore. I defended my dissertation on April 28th. The room was packed with faculty, graduate students, and even some undergraduates who'd heard about my work. I presented 2 hours of research, answered every question the committee asked, and passed with distinction. Dr. Okafor hugged me afterward. "Welcome to the club, Dr. Morrison." Dr. Morrison. I'd earned it. For years of graduate school, 6 years since my parents kicked me out, and I was finally Dr. Selene Morrison with a PhD in biochemistry. The university scheduled the building dedication ceremony for May 15, 2 weeks after Cassandra's medical school graduation. Mrs. Chen wanted it to be a major event. University officials, faculty, local press, donors, everyone who had supported the biochemistry program. And that's when I found out that Cassandra's graduation was May 3rd at the medical school campus across town. Same city, same weekend that family and friends would be visiting for graduations. I thought about my options. I could ignore it, focus on my own success, let my family continue thinking I was a failure somewhere. Or I could show up and let them see exactly what I'd become. Dr. Chen, my therapist from all those years ago, helped me think through it during one of our occasional check-in sessions. I still saw her a few times a year, just to maintain my mental health and process major life events. "What do you want to get out of seeing them?" she asked. "I want them to know they were wrong about me," I admitted. "I want them to see that I didn't just survive without them, I thrived. I want them to know that everything they said about me being a failure and a quitter was a lie." "That's understandable. But Selene, you need to be prepared for the possibility that they still won't acknowledge what they did wrong. Some people never do." "I know," I said. "But I need to do this for me, not for them. I need to face them as Dr. Selene Morrison, as someone who accomplished everything they said I couldn't." So I made a plan. A beautifully calculated, perfectly executed plan. I found out where Cassandra's graduation ceremony was being held, the medical school's main auditorium. The ceremony was open to the public, with tickets required only for the reception afterward. I could walk in and sit in the general audience section without anyone stopping me. I took the day off from lab work. I got my hair done professionally for the first time in years. I wore a beautiful navy blue dress that I'd bought specifically for the building dedication ceremony. I put on makeup carefully, highlighting features that had matured over 6 years. I didn't look like the broken 22-year-old they'd thrown out anymore. I looked successful. Confident. Powerful. I arrived at the medical school early and took a seat near the middle of the auditorium where I'd have a clear view of the stage but wouldn't be immediately obvious to my family. I watched as people filed in, families proud and excited, graduates in their ceremonial robes. And then I saw them. My mother, wearing an expensive cream-colored suit and too much jewelry. My father in a dark suit, looking distinguished and proud. They walked down the aisle looking for seats, and for a moment, my mother's gaze swept right past me. She didn't recognize me. 6 years and a complete transformation, and her own daughter was invisible to her. They sat 5 rows ahead of me and to the left. I could see the backs of their heads. Could see my mother lean over to whisper something to my father, both of them smiling. Cassandra walked across the stage when her name was called, Dr. Cassandra Morrison. She'd done it. Medical school was complete. She was officially a doctor, just like our parents had always dreamed. I felt a complicated mix of emotions watching her. Pride, because graduating medical school is an incredible accomplishment. Jealousy, because she'd had our parents' full support while doing it. And satisfaction, because I knew what was coming next. The ceremony ended. Families flooded toward the exits and toward the graduates. I stayed in my seat, watching my parents make their way to Cassandra. I watched them hug her, watched my mother cry happy tears, watched my father beam with pride. This was the moment. I stood up and started making my way through the crowd toward them. My mother saw me first. I was walking directly toward their group, and she looked at me with that vague smile people give strangers in crowds. Then her eyes focused. Recognition flickered. Her smile froze. "Selene," she whispered, and I saw her face go pale. My father turned, following her gaze. His expression shifted from confusion to shock to something I couldn't quite read. Cassandra was still hugging someone, hadn't noticed me yet. "Hello, Mother." "Father," I said calmly, stopping a few feet away from them. "Congratulations, Cassandra," I added as my sister finally turned and saw me. Her mouth literally fell open. "What are you doing here?" my mother hissed, recovering from her shock enough to sound angry. "You can't just show up after 6 years." "Actually, I can," I said pleasantly. "It's a public event. And I wanted to congratulate my sister on her graduation. Becoming a doctor is a remarkable achievement." Cassandra just stared at me like I was a ghost. "Selene? You look so different." 6 years will do that," I said. "A lot has happened." My father found his voice. "We heard you dropped out. That you were working odd jobs. What are you doing now?" This was the moment I'd been waiting for. "Actually, I went back to school. I finished my bachelor's degree in biochemistry with a 3.95 GPA. Then I was accepted into a PhD program. I just defended my dissertation 3 weeks ago, so I'm Dr. Morrison now, too. Dr. Selene Morrison, PhD. I watched the words land like bombs. My mother's face went from pale to flushed. My father's eyes widened. Cassandra's shock deepened. "You have a PhD?" my father said, and I could hear the disbelief in his voice. "In biochemistry?" "Yes. My research focuses on protein misfolding in neurodegenerative diseases. I recently published a paper in Cell that's been getting quite a bit of attention in the field. I'm also the inaugural director of the new Chen Laboratory for Protein Research at the university." "The Chen Laboratory?" My mother's voice was faint. "We saw something about that in the news. A major donation. $30 million for a new research building, plus $5 million for my laboratory specifically," I confirmed. "The building dedication ceremony is in 2 weeks. Mrs. Chen was very impressed with my research and wanted to support its continuation." The silence that fell over my family was deafening despite the crowd noise around us. "You're running a research laboratory?" Cassandra finally said. "But you dropped out. You gave up." "No, I had a mental health crisis that you all chose to see as weakness instead of illness. I took time to heal, and then I came back stronger." "Everything you said I couldn't do?" "I did it. Everything you said I wasn't capable of? I proved you wrong." My mother reached for my arm. "Selene, we should talk about this privately." "We can," I stepped back, avoiding her touch. "There's nothing to talk about. You made your position clear 6 years ago when you kicked me out and called me an ugly failure. When you told me not to show my face at this family again. I just wanted to stop by and let you know I'm doing fine without you." Better than fine, actually. We made mistakes, my father said, and for the first time, I heard something that might have been remorse in his voice. We should have handled things differently. Yes, you should have. But you didn't. And I learned to survive without you. I built a life and a career that I'm proud of, and I did it entirely on my own. People around us were starting to notice the tension, sensing that this wasn't a happy family reunion. I saw some of Cassandra's medical school friends glancing over curiously. The building dedication is May 15th at 2 p.m., I said. It'll be covered by local news. In case you're curious about what I've been doing with my life. And then I walked away, leaving my family standing there in stunned silence. But what happened at that dedication ceremony? That's when everything truly came together. The 2 weeks between Cassandra's graduation and the building dedication were surreal. My parents tried to contact me, calls, emails, even showing up at my apartment once. I didn't respond. I'd said what I needed to say, and I was focused on preparing for the ceremony. The university's communications team helped me prepare remarks for the dedication. Mrs. Chen wanted me to speak about my research and what the new laboratory would mean for future discoveries. I worked on my speech carefully, crafting words that would honor Mrs. Chen's generosity while also telling my own story. The morning of May 15th dawned clear and beautiful. The ceremony was being held outside, in front of the new building that bore Mr. Chen's name. A temporary stage had been set up, with rows of chairs arranged for guests. The building itself was gorgeous, modern architecture with huge windows, state-of-the-art laboratory space inside, and a prominent sign, the David Chen Biochemistry Research Center. I arrived early to do a sound check and go over final details with the event coordinator. Local news crews were setting up cameras. University officials were arriving in suits and academic regalia. Mrs. Chen arrived with her family, and she hugged me tightly. "This is your day too, Selene," she said. "You should be so proud." I was proud. 6 years ago, I'd been homeless and hopeless. Today, I was being honored as a leading researcher with my own laboratory. The transformation was almost unbelievable. The ceremony was scheduled to start at 2 p.m. At 1:45, I peeked out from behind the stage area where I was waiting. The chairs were filling up with faculty, students, donors, community members. The local news cameras were positioned and ready. And then I saw them. My parents, dressed formally, taking seats near the back. Cassandra was with them, looking uncomfortable. They'd come. My heart started racing. I hadn't expected them to actually show up. Part of me had hoped they wouldn't, that I could have this moment without them there. But another part of me, the part that was still that hurt 22-year-old girl they'd rejected, wanted them to see everything. The ceremony began promptly at 2 p.m. The university president welcomed everyone and talked about the importance of research, about the university's commitment to advancing scientific knowledge. Then he introduced Mrs. Chen. She spoke beautifully about her husband, about his brilliant mind that had been stolen by Alzheimer's, about her hope that research like mine might spare other families that pain. She announced the creation of the Chen Laboratory and the full scope of her donation. And then she said something I hadn't expected. Part of this donation includes an endowed professorship. The Chen Family Professor of Biochemistry will be a position reserved for a researcher doing innovative work in protein science. And I'm pleased to announce that the inaugural Chen Professor will be Dr. Selene Morrison, whose groundbreaking research made me believe that real progress is possible. The crowd applauded. I felt tears prick my eyes. An endowed professorship meant job security, research funding, recognition. It meant I'd made it in academic terms. At 28 years old, I was being given one of the highest honors in academic science. Then it was my turn to speak. I walked to the podium on shaking legs, looking out at the crowd. I found my parents in the audience. My mother was crying. My father looked stunned. Cassandra just watched with an expression I couldn't read. I began my prepared remarks, thanking Mrs. Chen, thanking the university, talking about the research and what it meant. But then I deviated from my script. I want to share something personal, I said, my voice steady despite my nerves. 6 years ago, I was in crisis. I was struggling with my mental health, and I made the difficult decision to leave school to get help. The people I loved most told me I was a failure. They told me I was giving up, that I lacked discipline and drive. They cut me off financially and emotionally, and I found myself with nowhere to go and no one to turn to. I could see people in the audience shifting uncomfortably. This wasn't typical dedication ceremony material. But I needed to say it. I worked 3 jobs to survive. I slept in my car. I went to therapy at a free clinic. And slowly, with the help of incredible people who believed in me when I didn't believe in myself, I found my way back. I returned to school. I discovered that I loved research. I found mentors who saw potential in me. I looked directly at my parents. The people who told me I was a failure were wrong. The people who said I'd never amount to anything were wrong. And today, standing here as Dr. Morrison, as the inaugural Chin professor, as the director of this incredible laboratory, I want to say to anyone who's been told they're not good enough, they're wrong about you too. You get to decide who you become. You get to prove them wrong. The applause was thunderous. People were standing. Mrs. Chin was crying. Dr. Okafor was beaming with pride. And my parents sat frozen in their seats, the full weight of what they'd done to me, and what I'd accomplished without them, finally hitting them. After the ceremony, there was a reception in the new building. People congratulated me, asked about my research, took photos. Local news crews interviewed me. University administrators talked about future collaborations. And finally, my parents approached me. Selene, my mother began, her voice trembling. That speech, we had no idea you'd been through all that. You had no idea because you didn't ask. You didn't care. You just threw me away, I said, my voice calm but firm. We thought we were doing the right thing, my father said. We thought tough love would motivate you to get back on track. Tough love? I repeated. You called me an ugly failure. You told me never to show my face at the family again. You abandoned me when I was at my lowest point. That's not tough love. That's cruelty. Cassandra stood slightly behind our parents, tears streaming down her face. I'm so sorry, Selene. I should have stood up for you. I should have helped you. I looked at my sister, at the person I'd grown up with, competed with, been compared to my entire life. Yes, you should have. But you didn't. You chose their approval over defending me. Can we start over? My mother asked desperately. Can we be a family again? We're so proud of what you've accomplished. And there it was. They were proud now that I was successful, now that I had prestigious titles and recognition. But they hadn't been proud when I was struggling, when I needed them most. I don't need your pride, I said quietly. I don't need your approval. I spent my entire childhood chasing it, believing that if I could just be good enough, you'd love me. But I've learned that I'm enough exactly as I am. My worth isn't determined by your opinion of me. Please, my father said. We made terrible mistakes. But we're still your family. No, I said firmly. Family supports each other. Family loves unconditionally. Family doesn't abandon people when they're struggling. You're the people who raised me, but you stopped being my family the day you kicked me out. So that's it? My mother asked, anger starting to creep into her voice. You're just going to cut us off forever? After everything we did for you growing up? Everything you did for me came with conditions, I said. I've spent 6 years building a life without those conditions, without your expectations, without your constant comparisons and criticism. And I've never been happier or more successful. So yes, that's it. You're welcome to follow my career from a distance if you're interested. But I don't want a relationship with you. I don't trust you. And I don't forgive you. I saw my mother's face crumple. My father looked like I'd slapped him. Cassandra just cried harder. I need to get back to the reception, I said. Mrs. Chen wants to introduce me to some potential collaborators. Goodbye. I walked away from them for the second time, but this time it felt different. This time I wasn't broken and desperate. This time I was Dr. Selene Morrison, accomplished researcher, professor, laboratory director. I was walking toward my future, not running from my past. Mrs. Chen found me a few minutes later. "Are you all right?" she asked gently. She'd clearly seen the exchange with my parents. "I am," I said, and I meant it. "I really am." "Family can be complicated," she said. "But found family, the people who choose to love and support us, can be even more powerful than blood." She was right. I thought about all the people who had helped me get here: Dr. Chen, my therapist; Mrs. Rodriguez, the financial aid counselor; Dr. Okafor, my advisor and mentor; Mrs. Chen herself; Jordan, my friend from graduate school who'd believed in me; the professors who'd written me letters of recommendation; the students I'd tutored who'd become friends. These people were my real family. They'd supported me when I had nothing to offer them in return except hard work and determination. They'd believed in me when I didn't believe in myself. The reception continued for another 2 hours. I gave tours of the new laboratory space, discussed potential research projects, posed for more photos. By the time it ended, I was exhausted but happy. As I was gathering my things to leave, Professor Howard, an old professor from my undergraduate days who'd come to the ceremony, stopped me. "I just want you to know how proud I am of you, Selene," he said. "I remember when you were struggling in your junior year, when you ended up leaving school. I worried about you. And to see you now, to see what you've accomplished, it's extraordinary." "Thank you," I said, genuinely touched. "Thank you for not giving up on me." "You didn't give up on yourself," he said. That's what mattered most. The news coverage of the dedication ceremony was extensive. The local paper ran a front-page story with the headline, "Rising Star, Local Researcher Overcomes Adversity to Lead Major Laboratory." The article included my personal story, not all the details, but enough to convey that I'd faced significant challenges and overcome them. My phone blew up with messages. Old friends from college reaching out. Distant relatives who'd heard the news. Former professors congratulating me. And, inevitably, more attempts from my parents to contact me. I blocked their numbers. Changed my privacy settings on social media. Made it clear to university staff that if my parents tried to reach me through official channels, the messages shouldn't be forwarded. I was done with them. Not out of spite, but out of self-preservation. I'd worked too hard to build a healthy, stable life to let them back in to undermine it with their conditional love and toxic patterns. In the months that followed, my career flourished. My research gained more recognition. I hired a small team of graduate students and postdoctoral researchers to work in the Chen laboratory. We made progress on understanding protein misfolding mechanisms. I published more papers. I received invitations to speak at conferences around the world. I also continued my therapy, knowing that success didn't erase trauma. Dr. Chen and I worked through my complicated feelings about my family, about the little girl inside me who still wished her parents loved her unconditionally, about learning to separate my worth from their approval. "You've done something remarkable," Dr. Chen told me during one session. "You've broken the cycle. You've proven that you don't need their validation to be successful and happy." "Some days it still hurts," I admitted. "Some days I see other people with their families, and I feel jealous. I wonder what it would be like to have parents who were proud of me, who supported me through everything." "That's normal," she said. "Grief for what you didn't have, for what you deserved but never received, is valid. You can mourn that while still moving forward." One evening, about 8 months after the building dedication, I received an unexpected letter in the mail. It was from Cassandra. I almost threw it away without reading it, but curiosity got the better of me. "Dear Selene, I've started and deleted this letter 100 times. I don't know if you'll even read it, and I wouldn't blame you if you didn't. But I need to try to say this. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry for everything. For not defending you when mom and dad kicked you out. For believing their narrative that you were weak and dramatic. For letting them compare us our entire lives and enjoying being the favorite instead of questioning why they treated you differently. I've been in therapy for the past 6 months. After seeing you at the dedication ceremony, after hearing your speech, I realized how messed up our family was. How much damage mom and dad did to both of us, but especially to you. I was the golden child, but that came with its own prison. I had to be perfect all the time. I couldn't make mistakes. I couldn't be human. And I watched them destroy you for being human, for struggling, for needing help. And I did nothing. I don't expect you to forgive me. I don't expect you to want a relationship with me. But I needed you to know that I see now what I couldn't see before. You were always the strong one. You survived what would have broken most people. You built something beautiful from nothing. I'm proud of you, sister. And I'm ashamed of myself. With love and regret, Cassandra. I read the letter 3 times, tears streaming down my face. It didn't fix everything. It didn't erase the years of pain and comparison and abandonment. But it was something. It was acknowledgement. It was an apology. I thought about responding. I drafted several replies. But in the end, I decided to wait. Cassandra was taking responsibility for her actions, which was important. But I needed to heal more before I could decide if I wanted her in my life again. 6 years after my parents kicked me out, I had everything I'd once thought impossible. I had a career I loved. I had financial security. I had found family who supported me. I had proven everyone who doubted me completely wrong. But more than any of that, I had proven something to myself, that I was worthy of love, respect, and success, not because of anything my parents did or didn't do, but because of who I fundamentally was. I was Dr. Selene Morrison. Survivor. Scientist. Success story. And I had written my own ending, one where I won. A year after the building dedication, I was sitting in my office in the Chen laboratory, reviewing grant applications with my research team, when my assistant knocked on the door. Dr. Morrison, there's someone here to see you. She says she's your grandmother? I looked up, confused. My grandmother, my father's mother, had passed away when I was a teenager. My mother's mother lived in Florida and hadn't spoken to me since I was kicked out. Did she give a name? I asked. Elizabeth Morrison. My father's mother's name had been Margaret. I didn't know any Elizabeth Morrison. Curious, I told my assistant to send her in. The woman who entered was probably in her 70s, with silver hair and kind eyes that looked oddly familiar. She wore a simple but elegant dress and carried herself with quiet dignity. Dr. Morrison, she said, her voice warm. Thank you for seeing me. I know this is unexpected. I'm your father's aunt, his mother's sister. Your great-aunt Elizabeth. I vaguely remembered hearing about a great-aunt, but I'd never met her. Please, sit down, I said, gesturing to a chair. What brings you here? She settled into the chair and looked at me with those familiar eyes, eyes that reminded me of my father's, but warmer. I read about your research and the laboratory dedication. I saw your name in the paper and realized you must be Robert's daughter. I reached out to your father to ask about you, and he told me what happened. What they did to you. I stiffened. I don't really want to talk about my family. I understand, she said gently. And I'm not here to defend them or ask you to reconcile with them. I'm here because I wanted to meet you and tell you something your father should have told you years ago. She reached into her purse and pulled out an old photograph. It showed a young woman, maybe in her 20s, standing in front of a laboratory. She wore a white coat and was smiling broadly. This is your grandmother, Margaret, when she was about your age. She was a biochemist too. I stared at the photo, shocked. What? I thought she was a homemaker. Elizabeth shook her head. She started out as a scientist. A brilliant one. She was doing research on enzyme kinetics in the 1960s, which was groundbreaking work for a woman at that time. But when she married your grandfather, he pressured her to give it up. He thought it wasn't appropriate for his wife to work, especially in a field dominated by men. He wanted her to focus on being a proper wife and mother. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. She gave up her career? She did, though it broke her heart. And she channeled all that unfulfilled potential into pushing your father to be successful, to achieve everything she couldn't. Unfortunately, your father then did the same thing to you and your sister, pushed you to achieve, to be perfect, to validate his worth as a parent. Generational trauma, I murmured. Exactly, Elizabeth said. Your grandmother made me promise, before she died, that if I ever found out one of her grandchildren was interested in science, I should tell them her story. She didn't want her sacrifices to be forgotten. She wanted you to know that you come from a line of women who loved science, even if they couldn't all pursue it. She handed me the photograph. This belongs to you now. Your grandmother would have been so proud of you, Selene. You accomplished what she couldn't. You became the scientist she always wanted to be. I looked at the photo of my grandmother, a woman I'd known only as elderly, only as my father's mother who made cookies and knitted sweaters. I'd never known she'd had dreams, ambitions, a career she'd been forced to abandon. Why didn't anyone tell me this before? I asked. Your father was ashamed. His mother gave up her dreams for his father, and then he did the same thing to you, trying to control your life, your choices, your path. He didn't give up science, he forced you to give up yourself. When he finally understood what he'd done, it was too late. You were gone. It's not an excuse, I said firmly. No, it's not, Elizabeth agreed. Understanding why someone hurt you doesn't mean you have to forgive them. But it might help you understand yourself better. You didn't just choose science randomly, Selene. It's in your blood. Your grandmother's passion lives on in you. We talked for another hour. Elizabeth told me stories about my grandmother, her quick mind, her curiosity, her love of learning. She told me about the research papers my grandmother had published under her maiden name, papers I could look up if I wanted. Before she left, Elizabeth gave me her contact information. I don't want to intrude on your life. But if you ever want to know more about your grandmother, or if you just want to talk to someone who understands the Morrison family dynamics from the outside, I'm here. After she left, I sat in my office holding the photograph of my grandmother. I'd achieved what she couldn't. I'd broken the cycle of giving up dreams for other people's expectations. I'd become Dr. Morrison in a way she never got to be. The story wasn't just about me proving my parents wrong anymore. It was about honoring the woman who came before me, who loved science but couldn't pursue it, whose dreams lived on through me. That night, I had the photograph professionally framed and hung it in my office, right next to my PhD diploma. Dr. Margaret Morrison, biochemist, grandmother, woman who deserved better. And Dr. Selene Morrison, biochemist, granddaughter, woman who made sure that sacrifice wasn't in vain. 3 years have passed since the building dedication. I'm 31 now, and my life looks nothing like what my parents imagined for me, but everything like what I imagined for myself. The Chin Laboratory has expanded. We've published multiple high-impact papers. My research team has grown to include 8 graduate students, 4 postdoctoral researchers, and 3 full-time lab technicians. We've made significant progress in understanding how to prevent protein misfolding, and our work is moving toward potential therapeutic applications. I've traveled to conferences in Paris, Tokyo, London, and Sydney. I've given keynote addresses. I've been interviewed for science magazines and podcasts. Last month, I received a prestigious national award for early career scientists. I bought a house, a small but beautiful craftsman with a garden where I grow vegetables and herbs. I adopted a rescue dog named Ada, after Ada Lovelace, who keeps me company during late-night data analysis sessions. I have a group of close friends, most of them other scientists who understand the demanding nature of research careers. I'm dating someone, a professor in the engineering department named Michael, who makes me laugh and supports my work and never makes me feel like I need to be anything other than who I am. We're taking it slow, but it feels healthy and good. I still see Dr. Chen for therapy occasionally, mostly just check-ins to process life transitions and maintain my mental health. The depression and anxiety that once nearly destroyed me are managed now, through therapy, medication, healthy routines, and the knowledge that I'm worth taking care of. My parents tried to contact me a few more times over the years. They sent cards on my birthday. They asked through intermediaries if they could meet with me. My father wrote a long letter apologizing for everything, explaining his own trauma from his upbringing, asking for a chance to rebuild our relationship. I read the letter. I appreciated the apology. But I didn't respond. Maybe someday I will. Maybe someday I'll feel secure enough in my healing that I can risk letting them back in some limited capacity. But right now, my life is peaceful, and I'm protecting that peace. Cassandra and I have slowly rebuilt a relationship. It started with email exchanges, careful and tentative. Then occasional coffee meetings when she was in town visiting friends. She's working as a pediatrician now, and she's also in therapy, working through the damage of being the golden child in a dysfunctional family. We'll never have the sister relationship we might have had if we'd grown up in a healthier family. But we're building something new, an adult friendship based on honesty and mutual respect rather than competition and comparison. Last week, she called me to share that she'd set a boundary with our parents for the first time in her life. They'd been pressuring her about when she'd get married and have children, and she'd told them firmly that her personal life was none of their business. I learned that from you, she said. Watching you stand up to them, refuse their control. It showed me I could do it too. I'm proud of you, I told her, and I meant it. Great-Aunt Elizabeth became an unexpected but cherished presence in my life. She attends my research presentations when they're local. She's met Michael and approves. She sends me articles about my grandmother's research that she finds in old scientific journals. She's the family member I always needed but never had. Sometimes, late at night in my office when I'm working on a particularly challenging experiment, I look at the photograph of my grandmother in her lab coat. I wonder what she would think of my work, of the laboratory that bears another Chen family's name, of the career I've built. I'd like to think she'd be proud. I'd like to think she'd understand that when I work late nights and push through failed experiments and refuse to give up on difficult research questions, I'm doing it for both of us, for the scientist she was and the scientist I became. My story isn't a fairy tale. My family didn't have a heartwarming reunion where everyone apologized and we all lived happily ever after. The trauma they caused doesn't just disappear because I achieved professional success. But my story is real. It's about survival, resilience, and the power of refusing to accept other people's definitions of your worth. When I was 22 and my mother called me an ugly failure, I believed her. When they kicked me out, I thought maybe they were right, maybe I was worthless. But I was wrong. They were wrong. I am Dr. Selene Morrison. I am a biochemist, a researcher, a professor, a laboratory director. I am a woman who turned pain into purpose, rejection into resilience, and failure into a PhD. I am the granddaughter of a scientist who never got her chance, and I'm living the dreams she had to abandon. And to anyone reading this who's been told they're not enough, who's been abandoned by the people who should have loved them unconditionally, who's struggling to believe they have value, you do. You are enough. Your worth isn't determined by other people's inability to see it. You get to write your own story. You get to define success on your own terms. You get to prove them wrong, not for their benefit, but for your own. Because the best revenge isn't cruelty. It's not making them suffer the way they made you suffer. The best revenge is building a life so full, so meaningful, so successful that their opinion of you becomes completely irrelevant. That's what I did. That's my story. And if I can do it, so can you. Dr. Selene Morrison, signing off.